Let's go for drugs and alcohol.
Okay, yeah.
Just a warm-up.
Both you and me, we have a quite extensive, experience with it. Not taking it or drinking it. Not taking it or drinking it, but by working with people with addiction problems. And both you and me, we've researched it, quite extensively in the past. And not that we're an expert, but we have our opinions about it. And there are certain things that seem quite unreasonable, certain perceptions, about certain drugs and the others. And yeah, that's definitely interesting. So,
well, that's where we came across a bit of a disagreement.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to develop, and that was that you were coming from an angle, which I guess I've heard a bit, and I find it slightly repellent. And the angle is, well, drugs are often not as bad. Illegal drugs are often not as bad as the legal drugs.
Not all the drugs, just to be clear. See, when I said that there are certain drugs that are really, really harmful, in my opinion, things like, methamphetamines and things like the heroin, and, clearly these things can destroy your life completely. But what I find really annoying is that not so much here in the UK, but in America, they have Adderall, which is basically a cousin of amphetamine. And it's being presented as if, it's such a bad drug that it can be so harmful, so on. But they use that medication to actually treat ADHD. So that helps children focus. And when it's being prescribed by the doctor, it's absolutely fine. But when it's cooked in some illegal drug, that's the worst thing that can ever happen to you. So this is just one of the examples that, make me really, really upset that, what the governments are trying to portray is that this is okay. It's because we say it's legal and it's absolutely fine. And this other stuff, it's not okay, it's harmful, and it's gonna, you're gonna end up, under the bridge. That's one of the things that make me really, really upset, I would say, that why wouldn't they be transparent about it? Why would they lie? The point of this discussion is to show the problem that I see all the time. The governments are trying to distinguish, this is legal, this is illegal, so it's okay for you to do this and don't do that. But ultimately, there are certain drugs like alcohol, especially. And let's face it, this is a drug. We call it alcohol, and in most people minds, the alcohol is different than any other drug. But let's be honest, it's not different. It's ethanol. It's just, one type of drug that could potentially be way more harmful to people, and potentially is more harmful than things like, let's say, a cannabis, of some of them psychoactive substances. But it feels to me that the government, on one hand, is trying to promote the health, trying to promote all these, safety measures. We're trying to protect NHS, so on and so forth. But it's okay for them to accept the fact that everybody drinks alcohol. Okay. So they can take drugs.
Okay. Well,
but they're not allowed to take other drugs.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. So I can see what you're railing against. You're railing against the government saying this is okay, but this is not. And that really annoys you.
Yeah. Just be
fair enough.
Yeah,
just be straightforward. You can't just be straightforward, because when you're an authority, you make the rules. So if you're going to criticise what they're doing, then you need to suggest something that would be better.
Oh yeah. So my suggestion is that because one thing that really makes me upset is that the government, especially lately, has been portraying themselves as an entity whose job is to protect as many lives as possible, that we have to save people. And I can understand that, but show me the evidence. So I'm not saying we should legalize all the drugs. No. What I'm saying is, just be honest about it, and you have to start looking at alcohol and even cigarettes as something that's equally or even way more harmful than other drugs that are currently illegal. And as you said, there's a reason why these drugs may be illegal, is because they can potentially lead to some horrible consequences, which makes absolute sense. And this is what alcohol does.
So what would you do then? Because to my mind,
there are only two options. Either ban alcohol altogether, or you legalize other stuff.
Well, what have they done? Let's look at what they have done. So
That's
they
a
have.
Good question.
So what have they done? They've tried different things with tobacco. They did a lot of messages of this is really bad for you, public. It's not good for you. They put the horrible pictures on the fag packets. Statistically, it didn't really make that much difference. People carried on smoking.
Yeah.
Then they went in a bit harder, a bit more authoritatively, a bit more controlling, and they banned it. They banned it in places. So you couldn't smoke indoors, you couldn't smoke here, you couldn't smoke there. They
great steps.
They changed the price. They changed so the price. It's always been like, well, it's not always, but for a very long time, it's had a ridiculous amount of tax, like 90% tax on it. So you're already getting charged a huge amount of extra money that the government's gaining, and partly that's because that's a prohibitive step. The same alcohol. They've also changed the quantity you can buy, so you can't buy small packets. You can only buy this bigger packet. Again, these are all steps to try and softly prohibit,
discourage people
from doing it. And to be honest, to be honest, look at statistics. They have worked to some extent with tobacco. A lot. The fact that it's not socially acceptable has been a major factor, I think, in a lot of people giving up, and statistics seem to reflect that. So what have they done with alcohol?
Yeah.
Not so much with alcohol.
Exactly.
They tried to do it, the financial thing. They increased the. I think this was probably more aimed at your hardcore alcoholics who were just going for most alcohol per unit per cost.
Because I think that's the problem. I think that's the issue. Because we wouldn't be having this discussion if each one of us, would be able to control fully, our urges to drink alcohol. And even if we were to drink alcohol in small quantities every now and again, ultimately, in the grand scale of things, it wouldn't be that harmful for us. Let's be honest. But the problem is the vast majority of people, in my opinion, of course, it's maybe you have a different opinion.
I have the same opinion, but the problem with that is that's a much more difficult problem to solve.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But I would like the government to be transparent about it. I would like them to say, well, listen, it technically should be illegal. And we're going to take all the steps we can to reduce the problem. But how do you reduce the problem? You're absolutely right. The problem is that it's being legal for centuries. It's always been legal. And it feels like, a form of escape for many people. When they use alcohol, as we said earlier today, they'll relax. Oftentimes they'll forget about problems and they'll feel better. But the problem with alcohol in particular is that, how addictive it is and how quickly from a few pleasurable moments you can turn into a full-blown addiction. And ultimately it can, completely destroy your physical and mental health and your family life as well. And there are other alternatives, like, for instance, there's a number of countries, including some of the states in America, that are slowly legalizing certain other types of drugs because they feel that, perhaps these drugs are not as harmful as alcohol is. And oftentimes these people now are getting a choice. What would you do? Would you rather have this or would you rather have that? If you want to get that, feeling of relaxation, or if you want to switch off for a moment, you can choose that. And of course, I'm not trying to be a proponent of taking drugs because, ultimately, having a clear and sharp mind is the best state you can be in because you can learn new things, you can remember everything quite clearly, and you just feel great overall. And the problem with most drugs is that you could get used to this special feeling and you can crave it too much. And that's what usually happens in most of our lives. Our lives are not as exciting as they could be if we regularly take either alcohol or any other drugs, because everything seems quite dull after that. And then what you want to do, you just want to make your life to feel a little bit happier. So that's when you would take it.
I agree with lots of what you say. I think they're a bit dangerous. They're like vehicles.
They are.
Vehicles are a bit dangerous. You could run somebody over with one of those and kill them. And that's why we put certain restrictions upon them, and rightly so. So MD can't go and jump in one. They've got to have passed tests. They've got to, and we have things to try and police that. So we have the same thing with alcohol. It's there's and with drugs as well. It's like they're illegal, but they're not as well. I mean, heroin's not illegal for your doctor to give you when you've lost a leg or you're in some serious pain, and it would be appropriate to use it in that circumstance. It's really useful.
Yeah, but I'm not quite sure with that one. Given the huge amount of evidence available right now, do you really think that's such a good idea, knowing how addictive that is? And oftentimes people who end up in this, serious car accidents, let's say, and they're being given heroin for a short period of time. Oftentimes, these people have to be put on methadone after that, and they have to stay on it for a very, very long time. And methadone is just, slightly more legal form of a heroin, which, with much lesser effects. But ultimately, it's equally as addictive. I've had so many clients who've been on it for years and years, and they wish they could stop taking it, but they feel like they can't do it.
I have not come across so many people. Like, I've come across a hell of a lot of people and worked with a very large number of people who take methadone, but none of them got there from prescribed heroin for some, like when their doctor gave them. So I'm not saying it never happens, but I would imagine that's pretty rare, to be honest. Like, people go into hospital all the time, all over the world, and heroin is used. It's like used all over the place, but it doesn't lead to somebody being prescribed methadone. But it's not that it never does, but I don't think that's very ordinary.
But
I'd have to check
do you
that
not
out.
see this to be a problematic, though? Okay, somebody's addicted to heroin, so they use this as a replacement. They use it as a replacement, and they stay on it. So I think this is really horrible approach. If you were to use it in the very first instance to help people to wean them off that bad stuff, I could see the reasoning. But why would the doctors allow any of these people to get a regular repeat prescriptions? Why are these doctors not trying to wean them off the methadone? It feels like, once they're on it, they're on it. And then oftentimes they decide how many pills or whatever they'll take. So,
because there's a facet to it that's psychological, that's not just chemical. So how does the doctor sort that out? How do they?
Maybe that's a very fair point, and this is exactly what I'm saying. Maybe prescribing this methadone to begin with is a bad idea, because what you're doing, you're just transferring one addiction into another. And ultimately, people are in a hole. People are not able to go to work. People are not able to function normally. And their mind is never really clear and sharp as it would be without any chemicals in their mind. So that's my biggest problem. You're absolutely right. How do we... It's psychological. Yes, it is. So we shouldn't be treating one substance abuse with another substance. It's like even a good example is this e-cigarettes that we have these days. I find that most people who stopped smoking cigarettes, they just replaced it now with these e-cigarettes. And my biggest concern with these is that they've been around for just a couple of years. And we have no idea what could be potential long-term effects of taking these into your lungs for so many years. And I guess we'll find out soon enough. And in 20, 30 years, I hope not, so many people will end up having a cancer because of, some ingredient that was found in some of these. And clearly, today, people don't know that, and it's not done maliciously.
Yeah, I think they know a bit. Like, there was some things, one of the chemicals was causing popcorn lung, they called it, which was, hugely damaging to your lung. And so that the ones that contained that were removed. But yeah, what's the long-term consequence? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a particularly healthy thing. Just using your brain It just doesn't seem like a particularly healthy thing to be constantly putting chemicals into your lungs.
Yeah, that's my point. And but now we have to ask ourselves a question: which one is more damaging? And if these e-cigarettes would be statistically even at 50% less damaging, I think that would be good enough justification to put people who are currently smokers on these, because it would at least reduce the risk of dying or having these diseases by 50%. So anything is better than nothing. But my concern is it's because it's so new, and we just don't know what are the long-term effects. And what if, because of doing this, in your 50s, 60s, you'll end up with some form of asthma that's really, really bad, that you can only treat with, let's say, the same chemicals that you've been taking in for so many years because your body got dependent on it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just, my mind just runs wild.
I mean, I guess we've got a few things. We've got the old laws and things that the governments have done, the laws against certain drugs that they've been in place for a long time, and sometimes they fluctuate. Like cannabis goes through different levels. Sometimes it's class B, class C. So things can change within that. I suppose an interesting point, in fact, is the new drugs that have come along, the legal highs, and there's been loads and loads of them. And at first they come out and they're legal because there is no law against this, and they're abused, and some of them have got horrible consequences. A lot of people having drug-induced psychosis, going to hospital because of them, and quite a few deaths as well. And then later on, a law comes, because it's not easy to just make a law. It takes a little bit of time, and so laws come out against them. So they're different. They're different from the drugs. But really, the point that you're looking at is the government's involvement and what they're saying is okay to do and what they're saying is not okay to do, and the transparency. But it's not hypocrisy. It's like you make some rules, you make your choices. It doesn't. Sometimes it's just because it's a difficult situation. I don't think it's hypocrisy. I think what it is they're not always informing you. It's not blatant. It's not blatant information. Like there is sometimes when it's blatant information. So putting a label on a cigarette packet saying, here's somebody who has a giant hole in their throat because they smoke. Here's somebody else. Here's their lungs that we've cut open, and have a look at these.
You're absolutely right.
Lungs. So that's blatant. But then you could argue against that and say, well, I don't want to see that stuff. That's propaganda.
I think it's not propaganda. This is the exact result. I think personally, I would be happy with them putting a similar label on the bottles.
It was propaganda. It was propaganda what they did. Another part of what they did with the hardcore thing was the advertising. The really brutal. They did it with alcohol. They did it with smoking. I mean, I still remember the adverts where people are eating the fag ash and everything out an ashtray. They're taking somebody a tube and they're saying this is like your vein, and they're squeezing out the fat. It's so. I mean, that's propaganda.
They did a good job with this. That's propaganda, but really.
Well, you say the end justifies the means. Other people say I'm going to start smoking because they're doing this.
But no. I think you misunderstand. If you do something with the genuine intention of trying to make a positive change in the society, and based on facts, that this is so harmful and has such a huge impact on the health services, that it's obvious that this is what you want to do, even if it's a propaganda. I think that this pictures of horrible deaths of people with the holes in their throats, so on and so forth. These are some of the consequences. These are, let's say, results of having a throat cancer or things that could be potentially avoided by smoking. So I don't really think you could say propaganda, but I think this is what can potentially happen. The chances of this happening is statistically significantly higher for you smoking the cigarettes than to someone who chooses not to. It doesn't mean that the other person can never get their throat cancer. Of course they can. Mm-hmm. But I think this is actually a good thing. And I think that perhaps if they really trying to make a difference, especially in terms of alcohol, they should start putting, similar pictures on the bottles, resulting people, ending up homeless, broken families.
Hear me when I say it's. I'm not saying it's bad, and I know the word propaganda is usually almost always associated with something that you're saying is bad. I'm just saying it is propaganda.
Yes.
That's what it is. But I'm not saying it's a bad use of it. Like, hey, yeah, you're right.
And that's what I don't understand. You know, the government seem to be able to come up with all these tactics, and they're really trying. I know it's impossible to, switch it overnight, but they're really trying. They're doing something actively. Look at the alcohol on the other hand. Look at the adverts of alcohol. All these young, wealthy people, beautiful looking, drinking alcohol, having fun, beers and everything else. And you think to yourself, this is not my experience. Normally, when somebody has a couple of bottles of whatever, they look like, train wreck. And, the people that I deal with are people who ended up, with, literally under the bridge, who ended up with no families, who ended up with, liver conditions, with a horrible health. Mm-hmm. And why, explain to me why government's able to make such a progress in one area, but cigarettes and alcohol are so closely related that it feels that the alcohol is completely immune from that, even though I think personally that the alcohol is causing even more deaths and puts way more pressure on health services ultimately as a result of many years of drinking than cigarettes, or they're really comparable. So my point is, stick to one line when it comes to all these substances. Don't try to portray one as being worse than others. So that's why I find the big problem with all these laws, that they're based on outdated information, because, in the 60s or 70s, they had to ban these drugs, like psychoactive drugs, because they're so dangerous. But they haven't done anything.
So can I ask you then, is it that I struggle to find something that you can pin on the government and blame for that? It sounds more like what you're upset about is public perception.
Yeah.
Public perception is that these things are
my beef
this is much worse than this, when really they're both really
You're
bad.
right, but my beef is with the governments because, as you said, the governments have overarching powers. They can decide what is okay to be shown on a TV and what isn't okay. And the problem is that it feels like they're giving an open permission for all the advertisers and all the medias just, portray this the way that that generates the most money. That's basically what it is. And because of that, because of the fact that, how our psychology works, if you see something, on the TV as an advertisement, and if you see other people are telling you that they're having, a happy hour, after Friday's hard day of work, everyone thinks of it. It's like, yeah, that's what people do. It's absolutely fine. It's completely socially acceptable, and there's nothing wrong with it. And that's my biggest problem. People are being delusional.
Well, let's look at it then.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw the same adverts as I did when I was young.
I probably didn't.
So do you remember one? And it had a classic tune on it. So memorable. It was Tommy Cooper, I think, the comedian, or maybe I make that up. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it was for Hamlet cigars, and it was basically like the man who smokes Hamlet, and it's like a reserved sort of really cool gentleman. And there was lots of adverts like that for smoking, which made it look really cool and trendy
and appealing. Yeah.
And you don't see this anymore, and you're not going to see them anymore.
That's true, but you can still see the advertisements, and the problem is with the public perception.
Where can you see the advertisements like that?
I don't watch TV. I haven't watched TV for many years.
But even online, for many years, those have been
online,
gone for quite a lot
YouTube,
of years now.
I think that you can see some of them. I don't know, because I pay for my premium account, so I don't get to see any of these wonderful adverts. But from what I've heard from people, yeah, you can still see the advert of Corona and every single time.
For alcohol, yeah, you still get them for alcohol.
Yeah, that's
I think for
what I'm
smoking,
saying.
not so much.
No, so
there's
absolutely
a bigger war
not.
on smoking than there was on alcohol.
That's my
that's
argument.
government. Like, why do you not see them?
Why? Because, government finally...
Well, is it because people still don't buy
stepped up.
cigarettes? Is it because people still don't sell cigarettes and want to sell them?
No, it's
those
because
things still
government
exist.
have made an executive decision that they are willing to make a difference, that they really care about people's health. So it's fine. But my
It's
question
not
is...
as simple as that. It's not a case of caring or not caring. It's a case of how much control do you put in. So if you think of governments as parents and us as the children, yeah, then for an adult to a child, You want to put some rules and boundaries in place, but you don't want to micromanage. That kills them. They need to take some responsibility themselves, and that's what society's like. Government. I don't want the government micromanaging me. I want freedom.
Freedom! So fresh, so new. Freedom! It's all for you.
What sort of world are you living in, my friend?
What you're suggesting is the
You're talking
government should
about wonderful
micromanage.
conservative world that everyone can take a full responsibility for their actions and foresee any potential consequences.
But what you're promoting, what you're requesting, is that the government, because they have the power, should use that power to do this. But you're talking about micromanagement. It's like,
no,
I don't want the government to do that. I don't think that's a healthy thing.
This is not what I intended to say, maybe.
I think it's where your argument leads. I don't think it's maybe where you didn't intend it, but I think it's a natural conclusion of
what I'm trying to say. We started talking about, the drugs, legal, illegal, and, we talked about cigarettes, legal highs. But my problem with all these is that they should all be portrayed the same way. You shouldn't be making a distinction between, one being worse than the other. If you're really trying to portray that the other drugs are so harmful and can potentially lead to horrible consequences, be consistent with yourselves. Just stick to it and do the same thing with alcohol.
Logical way, the only way you can do that is you either ban alcohol or you legalize other drugs.
Yeah, that's what I said to begin with. This is the only solution.
So what happens if you legalize other drugs?
What happens, I think that way you'd give people who, let's say, that's why I was talking about that chart, how dangerous, certain drugs are. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the alcohol, it's probably at the very top of these, horrible consequences. Then you have, these really hardcore drugs. But what I'm talking about is that, places like Amsterdam, for instance, when they have legalized cannabis, it doesn't seem like, everyone's walking around high over there. But I'm not exactly sure about statistics, but I would bet that they have significantly lesser problem with people with the alcohol-related conditions than they have in other countries. And the other thing is, looking at the studies, you'd see that, for instance, cannabis would be significantly less harmful to your body overall than drinking alcohol for the same period of time. And last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, a DMX have passed away. Have you heard that?
No.
An American rapper,
I've heard of him before, but
I've listened to his raps when I was in my teens. It was amazing, yeah. But the guy, I didn't realize the guy struggled with addictions, with crack cocaine and stuff. Apparently, he's been to rehabs many times, and ultimately he must have overdosed, and he died of a heart attack a couple of weeks ago. But if you would look at his pictures, for the last couple of years, he was 50 years old, 50. He looked horrible. But on the other hand, you've got someone else that really is a walking example of smoking cannabis, which is a Snoop Dogg. Look at him. Same age. He's roughly 50 years old. But he doesn't look that much different than he looked 30 years ago. And if you think about it, he's pretty much smoking that stuff all the time. Think about someone who would start drinking alcohol at the age of 50 and would drink it every single day. How likely he would live until the age of 50? And what would be the health-related consequences of that drinker and that smoker? You know what I'm trying to say? And
they're going to die of different things. It's the lungs versus the pickling your organs.
But that's the thing. It's like, okay, but apparently smoking tobacco is significantly more harmful than smoking this other stuff. So, you know what I mean? There are people who don't drink, but they smoke all their life. And so how do we settle that one?
I would have to call that into question.
Yeah,
from the research I've read, a joint has 10 times more tar than a cigarette. So, however, what I think and that would be like, the thing is, the reality is a joint's got tobacco and then it's got your hash in it. Whereas if somebody's just smoking weed, just smoking the plant with no tobacco, but the problem is it's the combustion that happens when you set something on fire and inhale it into your lungs. Because for a while I gave up smoking and I started smoking. I just wanted to be with the people who were smoking and be with them and experience it. So I bought the herbal tobacco. And I started just having the odd one of those, and it wasn't particularly pleasant. There's no nicotine in it. And then somebody pointed out, That's just as bad for you. Smoke, like it's the same tar that's still going in. Yeah, you're not getting nicotine, but it's the combustion. And I was like, that was a bit of a revelation for me. I was a bit disappointing. I think I started smoking again at that point.
Yeah, but see, my point though is that I'm not trying to convince other people, oh, go and smoke weed because it's probably healthier for you. No, I'm just trying to emphasize, how dangerous drinking alcohol is and how harmful it is to our body, especially liver. And, I've had so many clients and, perhaps my perception of this is skewed because of, the line of work that I do. But I see people who've been drinking for 15, 20 years on pretty much daily basis. And these people, I would never want to live the life they live.
Yeah. Well, here's a thought from me. Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. I think if you legalized all the drugs, people would drink less alcohol.
Not all the drugs. Not all the drugs, just to be clear.
Why?
Why? Why would you legalize all the drugs?
Well, your main complaint is that it's not fair that the government differentiates. So why are you getting to differentiate?
No. I told you there's a scale. There's a scale. I think that alcohol should be get rid of from that scale altogether because it's so dangerous. Perhaps they should look at these things. There's this book, Stealing Fire, that I'm reading. And I'm not trying to promote taking drugs, just to be clear, because I personally don't take any. And I'm happy with myself that way. But what I'm trying to say, that there could be potential alternatives to alcohol that could give you this really nice feeling, but which will be significantly less harmful if you do it recreationally, like, once every couple of months or something.
Like the e-cigarette equivalent to smoke?
No, like a odd glass of wine or 2 cups of whiskey every couple of weeks, let's say. So that's what I was trying to say. Not to go start smoking weed and drink and smoke it every single day for the rest of your life. No, that's not.
But so you were saying that you would rank order those.
Yes, and then
so how would you do that? How would you go about saying?
There are scales. There are scales that will tell you how many people per million that particular substance killed historically, what sort of effects that substance could have on the person at the time of taking it. And let's face it, there's such a huge illegal market that, the fact that the law prohibits people taking these drugs, that in reality, most people that, I'm talking nonsense, but loads of people are regularly taking the recreational drugs, and it looks like the world is not ending. It doesn't look like, we're living in apocalyptic reality when everyone is stoned or high all the time. This is not the way it works, and I'm thinking that from the government standpoint, they would benefit from it, hugely financially if they could implement it. And I think that of all the drugs, I think that the only one, from what I've read, maybe 2, that are least harmful would be the cannabis in comparison. And I don't want to say these psychoactive substances because they can be used therapeutically. So if somebody suffers from a PTSD or suffers from a strong depression, and giving them these type of drugs as a medication to help them open themselves up during the sessions with psychologists. Apparently, it shows enormous changes. The people can, suffer from PTSD for years and then have one session and the whole PTSD goes away.
So does this sound like a good system to you? A system where a government would allow certain drugs to be used by doctors and researchers to test on subjects to find out what the benefits are and then potentially prescribe them in a medicinal ways?
Yes.
That's what we have.
No, we haven't. No. Look at medicinal cannabis, for instance, yeah? And it apparently it has so many different, positive effects. It can be turned into medications. It can help people with cancer, people with, chronic pain, and so on and so forth. But you can't really get it, on a prescription. You can't really
nobody would be that. A lot of people wouldn't be interested in that because a lot of people want to smoke it to get high. And the reality is, if your doctor says, right, here's your little bottle of CBD oil, rub that on the little cancerous spot, a lot of people are not really interested in that because there's no getting high in that. Because if you're going to smoke cannabis that the doctor's going to give you. Like, how could he ethically do that? That's bonkers. That he would be. I mean, it's so unethical. It's morally wrong for a government to allow that, because it's doing so much damage. They're giving you something that's damaged, and you're talking about the evidence for cannabis.
So, looking at your logic, what about methadone? What about all these, pain medications?
What's methadone doing? What is it treating?
What's it treating? It's treating mental health conditions.
Psychological addiction, yeah. It's treating psychological addiction. It's treating the short-term... It's not treating short-term, because you got to... Yeah. Arguably, it's treating a short-term addiction to heroin, so it's the body's physical addiction. So it's stopping the person have to deal with the withdrawal symptoms and all the rest of it.
What would happen if you were to stop...
Clearly, that's not how it's been used.
Yeah,
it's been used for a long time. So it's psychological.
Yes.
That's what it's been used to treat.
What would happen if you were to stop taking methadone, abruptly? Just, I'm stopping right now. What would happen to you?
If you're taking a lot of methadone, then you might go through some of the withdrawal symptoms, I'd imagine.
You could potentially even die. You could get a heart attack.
Same alcohol, yep.
Same with alcohol, exactly. And so that's what I'm saying. But the doctors don't have a problem with prescribing this to people. And not only that, today's wisdom, we know more and more about, the health. We know more and more about the way our pain is created in our mind, and prescribing people with a tons of painkillers to help them to manage that pain, which could be easily resolved by people taking more proactive steps, by moving more and trying some sort of psychotherapy rather than reaching for the drugs right away. That's why I see such a big problem with drugs in general, alcohol included. It is so bad for us. And if government was to come to me and tell me, well, listen, you won't be able to drink forever because we're trying to implement this new rule and we're just trying to help the people who struggle the most, and they can't have alcohol, but because they can't have it, we have to be even and equal, so you won't be able to drink alcohol for the rest of your life. Would you be willing to do that? I think that if they were to approach every single one of us individually, vast majority of us would agree to say, fine, if that's going to help, all of us as a society, I'll be willing. I'll be definitely willing.
Definitely not agree to that. There's just no way to agree to that, because where does it stop? You're not thinking in the
I know what you mean.
If you're going to get rid of everything that might be of heart, that is the way we're going. It's like, hate crime laws. So you don't want to offend anybody. You don't want to hurt their feelings.
But you don't understand.
Where does it stop?
That's what I'm saying. So you've got two options. You either do it that way, or you legalize the other drugs as well.
Or you have the option, which is the option that we have and have had for a long time, which is somewhere in between.
Okay. You just get it illegally.
Yeah. Well. I mean,
if you want to get it legally.
Get it. Yeah. And that's life though. It's like if you're going to give people choice, then they're going to have the choice. They're going to have the choice to abuse things. They're going to have a choice to do things that are damaging to the body.
Yes.
It's their choice. You get we don't give it to people all the time. Like, children get less choice because we think to ourselves, well, they don't have they've not formed the ability, they're not fully formed yet to be able to properly look at the consequences and then make their choices. But whereas that's the whole thing about being an adult. It's like, you're an adult now. We've educated you. We've given you basic education. So there's some tools. You can go out and you can do some things. So it's like, and some people get better education than others, but whatever. But now you make your own choices. It's like the beauty, and we're all as kids, we're sitting looking forward to the day when we become an adult and we can make our own choices. And it's like, you can, and you have the responsibility. And there's still some boundaries. You can't do whatever you want. You can't.
Yeah, of course.
If you choose to take illegal drugs, then there's potentially some consequences, and we've reduced those. Like with cannabis, you can take cannabis, and it's still illegal. But nobody's doing much to you. I mean, even you want to go and start dealing some cannabis pretty low scale, you're probably still not going to get much of a punishment.
Yeah, but let's face it. But the problem is, you said it yourself. It should be your choice to decide what is it that you want to do with your body. And ultimately, you're right. But that way, you say, it should be my choice whether or not I want to have that alcohol or not. But at the same time, it should be your choice if you want to take any other drug of your choice, as long as it's not going to harm other people. Shouldn't that be the case?
No,
Since this
because
is
it
your
can't
body.
not harm other people. Because for you to be able to do that, laws need to be changed. So those drugs need to be legalized. The penalty for using them in an inappropriate way.
So what's
deemed an inappropriate
where the
way.
alcohol comes into play? Explain that to me, because this is such a harmful drug. It's causing, it's crashing the families. It's causing, so many crimes are committed under the influence of alcohol as well as other drugs as well.
Okay, so you put that as number one. So if you put that as number one, yeah, to be fair, let's say we've got the power of society and we're going to control what's happening next. Let's remove alcohol and exchange it for one of the other ones. So what is it, and like...
That's the thing. I think that we would need to get some sort of a think tank to decide exactly which of these would be the least harmful, and perhaps give people a variety of these that would be the least harmful. So you wouldn't deprive people from having fun. You just give them something that will potentially not going to completely destroy their life. So and I can see the problem already. Yeah, so if we're going to ban it, they're just going to start selling it legally, just as they do with other drugs. So there's not simple solution. But my problem is the way it's being presented. This is okay because it's legal, but this is not okay because it's illegal, and this is way more harmful. And in people's mind, when you talk about drugs, drugs are dangerous, you can potentially die, this and this can happen. But alcohol is okay, it's just alcohol. You can buy it in the shop, You know what I mean? That's the problem with the perception that I have. So not so much whether it's okay to legalize or should we ban alcohol. No. The problem is with the way we view alcohol and how in our minds we distinguish these two. We think of it as two different things. But in reality, this is one thing and one thing only. It's a drug. It changes the chemical state of your mind, and it's damaging.
Yes, but
body.
no. There is another reality. And the other reality is it's not illegal. And the other one is illegal. So that's a reality.
Yeah, that's a reality.
And does it change the reality of what those drugs do to your body? No, not necessarily. But it changes how people view them. It does. And it skews how they view them. And some people will maybe unfairly say, oh, well, alcohol's okay, whereas this one's really bad. Whereas
people are uninformed, that's the problem. And although there's many television programs that would show, the bad effects of drinking alcohol, I think it's not being spread as effectively as, the negative effects of smoking cigarettes. Because I think that the governments are doing a great job when it comes to using their propaganda against, against the smokers, and just trying to promote a more healthier way of living. But I think that this should be transferred also to this. And we just have to be transparent, because that's the problem. In people's mind, it's not as harmful. And we know it is. So that's what our channel is to help people become better selves. At least that's the goal, or try to.
So you think that people don't know that alcohol is harmful?
See, there's this thing. You can know on a conscious level is bad for you, but you'll do it anyway.
So that's to do with authority. Condition. It's to do with authority. It's to do with it is a problem with authority. If somebody says, oh, you can do that, it's like, oh, if you see somebody else who's in an authority go and do something, you're like, all right, okay, well, they're doing it. So it's almost like, it must be safe for me to do it. It's the way that people are like sheep. We are like that.
Yeah, we are.
And it's why you have responsibility. If you have a position of authority, you have responsibility because other people are looking at you, and their actions are more likely to be affected by your decisions. So yeah, that's tricky. Thanks for listening. Me and Mariusz are both aware that we're not experts on this subject or many other subjects. I know we're just scraping the surface of this subject. It's a very interesting subject. It's a subject that probably everybody as a member of society has got some sort of opinion on. Love to hear your opinions. Please put them in the comment section below.
Yes, add something, into a comment section if you feel that we missed something. If there's something that you feel that we need to be educated on, feel free to write a comment.
And definitely we're going to read through those and hopefully get back to you. If we don't, then give us another comment saying, why haven't you got back to me? You said you would.